A study by the Bank of Korea claims almost 4 million jobs in the country may be replaced by AI technology over the next 20 years. So which jobs look to be negatively affected? Is AI driving tech layoffs in the US? And what are the broader social repercussions of such layoffs? Hope your work week is off to a good start. You're watching Tuesday's edition of Issues and Insiders. I'm Min Sunhee. So is artificial intelligence to blame for the recent layoff plans by companies here and elsewhere? To answer this question and more, I have Professor Song Soo-young at Chung-Ang University live on the line. Professor Song, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
I also have Professor Jeffrey Pfeffer at Stanford University with us as well. Professor Pfeffer, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me to be on your show.
Right then, Professor Pfeffer, is AI driving layoffs there in the US?
Well, layoffs, of course, existed long before AI came along, and there were many layoffs during COVID and just following COVID. So AI is probably going to make the layoff trend worse, but layoffs have really been a feature of the US economy for decades. So you can't really blame AI for the layoffs. I would blame companies, and their lack of concern for human well-being is more important as a determinant of layoffs than artificial intelligence.
I see. And before we delve further into that, then, Professor Song, what has been the impact of AI on Korea's workforce, would you say?
Yeah, according to some kind of anecdotal evidence, it tells us there is because of the customers for using the call center has been reduced. Therefore, then they have a cutoff and layoff, and so many the labor workers who has been employed in the call center. So call center is like some kind of connect the consumers who would like to make some kind of advice, hear some information through the call center. So this is a kind of anecdotal, but as Professor Pfeffer has mentioned earlier, the AI could replace in some sectors of industry necessarily, and some sector of the labor workers in terms of the productivity or skill base. So that plays out in some sector, in some technology areas, and in some sectors of level of technology could be affected more or less because because of the adoption of AI. So, but overall, the adoption of AI, despite some kind of uncertainty, still it could be beneficial and benevolent to the economy as a whole.
Right, yeah. Of course then. And now, Professor Pfeffer, like you mentioned earlier, you've been raising quite a bit of alarm over tech layoffs well before the global hype over generative AI. Now, you claimed earlier that the layoffs were largely because of corporate behavior. Could you explain that for us?
Well, companies, of course, copy each other, very much like human beings copy each other. And, and so when layoffs became a trend, many companies adopt layoffs, not because they're in economic trouble, or not because even necessarily AI makes jobs obsolete, but simply because they're expected to do it because other companies are doing it. So there's a lot of copycat layoffs, and also layoffs have become quite, if you will, fashionable for companies to do. And in fact, if you take the example of call centers, which my colleague just mentioned, I know of no consumer that loves automated voice response systems, even though they are widely diffused. And many people, if you go online, will find ways, you do searches, you can see ways you can actually get to a real live human being. So AVR, automated voice response, nobody likes, but companies are doing it anyway. So a lot of this is not about technology. A lot of this is around company values and the fact that they do not really prioritize human well-being. And as we know, layoffs have enormous consequences on human health, both mental and physical.
And just one impromptu question, Professor Pfeffer, would you say that this copycat behavior with regard to layoffs is centered highly on American tech companies?
Well, they're not just American tech companies. I think American companies in general The American companies have really specialized in layoffs. Take the airlines. When COVID came and airline travel declined, airlines laid off lots of people. Then when the travel recovered, they had trouble filling the ranks of pilots and other staff. And so therefore they could not really rebuild their route networks as fast as they would want to. So the copycat layoffs and layoffs in general are pervasive throughout the U.S. economy, not just in technology.
Right. Professor Song, the IMF, for its part, claims that 60% of jobs in advanced economies are exposed to AI, and half of these jobs may be negatively affected. What jobs are we speaking about exactly?
Yeah, according to IMF and until now, they emphasized that some less skilled labor workers are vulnerable to the adoption, or vulnerable to the layoff and separation of the job because of the AI could be overused to make some routine work is more could be conducted by AI and robot by themselves. But however, recently I have seen that some kind of change or some kind of the many other economists believe in that. That may not be true. The reason is because, as mentioned earlier, in the call center and the automatic the response style is not anymore popular, particularly among the older people. So that implies that demographic change could affect it, particularly demographic change and have more bigger older generations, old age persons in the economy is clearly manifest in the advanced economies. That implies that they are quite reluctant to rely on the services by AI provided services through the telephone. So that's why they may reduce the usage of the AI-supported or call center by themselves. So that is kind of a vicious cycle. Therefore, as a result, I'm absolutely in agreement with Professor Pfeffer's idea about the copycat behavior among the companies. The reason is even they are not sure. And also they are quite behave as myopic as and just focus on the very profitable monetary return. That is really in the long run, and they do not take into account of some side effect and the externality for the economy. As a result, this part is really we need some kind of some intervention is necessary for the upcoming days. I think currently the AI could have reduced the job opportunities in some particularly middle-level skills and the middle kind of jobs, which actually should be a good jobs to foster the middle-class people and middle-class income. So therefore, middle level of skills and technologies are mostly affected because due to the adoption of the AI.
I see. And staying with that, Professor Pfeffer, speaking purely as a scholar, how do you suppose AI looks to affect perhaps both the white-collar and blue-collar jobs?
Well, ironically, AI, the jobs that are likely to be replaced by AI are increasingly the high-skilled jobs that require more cognition and more analytics. Massage therapists, people who care for people in their homes, people who care for the elderly are less likely to be replaced by AI because it's hard to automate the kind of caring work that you see, for instance, home health workers do or nurses. So the AI displacement has really moved up, if you will, the economic chain, and now more high-skilled work is being automated.
And Professor Song, do you see layoffs as becoming, perhaps, and I quote from an earlier article that Professor Pfeffer had written, becoming a social contagion here in Korea in the near future as we open our doors wider to generative artificial intelligence?
Before referring to some social contagion, because Professor Pfeffer has mentioned the slightly nuanced view on the future of the jobs to be affected by the adoption of the AI, clearly, in the long run or dynamically, clearly the AI could replace currently, on the current situation, some high-level skill, but which was regarded as a high-level skill right now is not anymore high-level skill in the future. So that is like during the Industrial Revolution in the 19th and the 18th century, the weaver has replaced some artisan's loom. So that means at that time, the artisan's loom has been paid a lot, and it requires several training era and period and to be very and expertise in the artisan loom. So the same could be the case in this AI. Clearly, as Professor Pfeffer has mentioned, that the human touch, the jobs which need the human touch and the human analysis and the human interpretation of the statistical data is necessarily, they are not vulnerable to the AI job. Because AI still, they lacks in kind of some high level and understanding psychological effect on the job and the work and which are needed to help the economy to grow. So go back to the social contagion, which was mentioned. Social contagion is like as Professor Pfeffer has mentioned earlier, that social contagion is a copycat behavior, or this could be adopted. And I think social contagion could be the problem, particularly when the information asymmetry is quite pervasive. Therefore, when the information asymmetry and uncertainty there is uncertainty, but information asymmetry is resolved, and then this kind of social contagion could take place less often. However, still we live because we don't know yet what is the dynamic progress of the AI in the future. Therefore, to that regard, there is uncertainty. Then that means there is some kind of social contagion, but not much. It could be alleviated as time goes by.
Right, hopefully, of course. Professor Pfeffer, you've also been quite vocal about the alarming social repercussions of layoffs in general. Do you care to elaborate on your thoughts?
Sure. I mean, we go back now, if you go back 30 or 40 years, there have been a number of studies that show that layoffs basically double the risk of suicide, increase the risk of heart attack by 40%, increase the risk of depression and stress significantly. So the relationship between physical and mental health has been well established, and layoffs are basically harmful to people's health, both behaviorally and physically. And so that's been extraordinarily well established. So if we are concerned about social well-being, then we should be concerned about layoffs, because layoffs literally kill people.
And keeping in mind the concerns that Professor Pfeffer has just raised, Professor Song, do you suppose the global talk on regulating AI then should also include quite a bit of discussions on job stability for ordinary people?
Yeah, I believe that the AI could incur some kind of damage of the layoff in some sector. But on the other hand, they could create new jobs and new openings and new opportunities, particularly for the young generations. So considering this kind of demographic change for the advanced countries and developing countries, we need some differentiated policy to prepare for some adoption of AI and to minimize the malicious effect of the AI. In the future, I believe the AI is more likely to be a threat or challenging issues, not for the labor issues, but for the democratic institutions. Clearly, in the year of 2023, Europe and the United States they are really concerned about the big tech companies using AI. They have gathered a huge, substantial a gigantic amount of data. So that means that the privacy is exposed through the AI. Then that could be used some exploited by big tech companies. So big tech companies could be a direct threat against some democratic institution. Therefore, we need some kind of regulation that allows some individuals, once they participate in the platform through the AI and necessarily for the security issues and for the completion of delivery or other services, they need to expose their identification and some kind of information. Then the individuals should be allowed to erase what they have provided to the platform and the big tech companies. That part is a very crucial moment for the regulation to come up and considering the effects of AI in the future. So this part is rather than the layoff. I believe in the lump of labor fallacy, which has been even dated back to the 19th century, is because there is not any fixed limit of the job opportunities, because considering the dynamic aspect of the economy and the AI could create some new jobs, and also they could be aligned with human labor productivity improvement. So to that regard, I'm a little bit optimistic, and hopefully the AI could be used some benevolently, at least to the labor market. But for the democracy institution, the AI could be a really serious threat for the coming years.
Right. And Professor Pfeffer, keeping in mind what Professor Song has just said, what do you suggest with regards to how the international community of people, ordinary people, better preparing for the AI workplace?
Well, we need, I think, to prepare the people through training for jobs that are not going to be displaced. I think that's one part. But I think in general, Andrew Yang in the United States has proposed a guaranteed minimum income to try to protect people's well-being. I think you need some kind of regulation and or help for people who are displaced by AI. I am much less, I am much less convinced than my colleague that this is all going to be benign, because it wasn't benign before AI. There's been enormous amounts of social dislocation, ill health, both behaviorally and physically, from layoffs long before AI. So how this is going to make things better in a world in which it's already not so good, I don't really quite see. So I think governments are going to need to do something to help buffer the effect of job loss, because let's call it what it is. It's job loss. Governments will need to help buffer the effect of job loss on people, both the effects both on their mental health and on their physical health. And the two, of course, are connected.
And very briefly speaking, Professor, so what do you suppose the Korean government can do to ensure that people are not losing their jobs in the emergence of AI here?
I think government would like to rely on the fiscal policy and work as some kind of insurer of last resort, rather than just a lender of last resort or the borrower of first resort. What is needed right now is insurer of the last resort to protect and to help the people who are laid off to survive and overcome the obstacles and the difficulties upcoming because of the layoff or negative impact by the AI.
Right, surely the presence of tangible safety networks then. All right, Professor Song, as always, thank you so much for your insights. And Professor Pfeffer, it was a pleasure having you with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Right, well, on that note, we end this edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.